Recent 2025 surveys show you'll reach for your phone about 144 times today. That's once every 7 minutes you're awake. But here's the unsettling part. You're not really deciding to do it. Your brain runs on autopilot, wired for checking notifications almost as automatically as it breathes. Think about the moments it happens most. First thing in bed when your alarm goes off, or while you're getting ready for work. Each little glance seems harmless, yet it steals time from your own goals. You can start fixing this in 30 seconds with an evidence-based reset. But first, let's see how 144 tiny interruptions quietly add up to something much bigger. A day hijacked by 144 micro-interruptions. 144 interruptions. It doesn't sound like much when you first hear it, but stretched across an entire day, it reshapes your hours in ways that rarely show up on your calendar. Each check feels like crumbs, 30 seconds here, maybe a minute there. Yet when you apply even the simplest math, the scale becomes clearer. 144 checks per day across 30 days equals roughly 4,300 interruptions per month. If each one absorbed just a single minute, that's more than 70 hours. An entire work week and then some, gone in fragments so small they almost escape notice. This isn't a precise, universal figure, but it illustrates how those tiny glances compound until whole weeks of attention slip through unnoticed. And the cost isn't just measured in ticking minutes. It's in the way your thinking splits apart. Every time you look down at your phone, your train of thought derails, and it's not simply a matter of returning where you left off. Research cited in places like Page One Formula and Evolved shows it can take an average of 23 minutes for the brain to fully recover after an interruption. That means those 144 checks do not represent quick breaks. They are 144 derailments that keep you hovering at the surface of your own tasks, unable to sink into the rhythm needed for deep progress. This recovery gap is what psychologists call attention residue. The unfinished thought from the message you saw, the half-processed headline, the snapshot from a feed, all of it lingers in your working memory, even after you've returned to your project. That residue steals bandwidth from the task at hand, leaving you foggier and slower than before. Multiply that by dozens of interruptions each day, and it makes sense why focused work feels almost mythical in the modern world. You're not only losing time to the phone, you're dragging leftover fragments of distraction into everything else you try to do. This matters because concentration is not a switch you flip, it's a momentum you build. Work that demands creativity, strategy, or problem-solving emerges only once your mind settles into extended flow. Constantly stopping to swipe destroys that flow, forcing you to rebuild from scratch again and again. Tasks that should take an hour can sprawl into 3, not from lack of effort, but because you were never allowed to reach full depth before being yanked back to the surface. What looks like procrastination may in fact be the structural outcome of a brain conditioned to run in fragments instead of stretches. It's tempting to think this is a personal failing, that you simply lack discipline. But when billions of people repeat this same checking pattern daily, the more reasonable conclusion is that the pattern is designed, not accidental. Notifications don't buzz with random colors and sounds. They're deliberately engineered to trigger your survival wiring. The red dot, the vibration pattern, the timing, they function less like neutral tools and more like triggers that poke where you're most vulnerable. Blaming yourself misses the deeper point. This is a system optimized to hijack human attention at scale. When you zoom out, the social cost becomes clear. Fragmented focus doesn't just affect individual work. It lowers group productivity when everyone in a meeting glances down and checks out for even a moment. Students who carry attention residue from phones into class learn less, and families sharing a table may be physically present but scattered in mind. These effects add up across millions of people, creating societies that operate with diluted concentration, shortened patience, and restless energy. All consequences of engineered interruptions that masquerade as harmless habits. Recognizing this reframes the problem. These micro-interruptions are not neutral, and they are not purely about willpower. They are the product of intentional design choices that encourage behavior you would never have signed up for if presented directly. No one would agree to trade thousands of hours each year for trivial notifications, yet in practice, that's the deal we all live under. A minute at a time, the system extracts attention in the same way a machine siphons coins one spin at a time. And that comparison is no accident. Once you understand how these cues are structured, the link between your notifications and another familiar environment becomes hard to ignore. What feels like harmless checking starts to look a lot like another kind of machine that thrives on unpredictability and repeated pulls. And it explains why, even when you know the cost, you can't seem to stop returning. The casino in your pocket. Why is the device in your hand built to feel so irresistible? Because, in practice, your phone has been engineered to behave like a slot machine, a casino condensed into your pocket. Each time you unlock it, you're effectively pulling a lever, chasing a possible reward. Sometimes that reward arrives, a message from a friend, a like on a photo, or an unexpected headline. Other times, you get nothing. That uneven rhythm, the uncertainty about what each check will bring, is not a flaw. It's the feature that keeps you coming back. This design taps into what psychologists call variable reward systems. The concept is straightforward. When rewards are inconsistent, the drive to pursue them actually intensifies. Imagine if a slot machine paid out the exact same amount on the same schedule. You'd quickly get bored and leave. But when the payouts arrive unpredictably, with no way to forecast the win, people stay glued to the machine. Phones play by the same rules. Open a feed and you might catch something funny, something pointless, or nothing new at all. Yet that slight chance of stumbling on something rewarding, however rare, keeps you checking over and over. This is where dopamine matters. Dopamine isn't about happiness the way it's often described. It's about craving and motivation. It nudges you toward action, pushing you to seek. When you reach for your phone, dopamine spikes in anticipation. That buzz you feel comes more from the act of checking than from what you find after. This explains why you unlock the screen so much more often than anything truly worthwhile appears. That gap between anticipation and payoff has been designed into the process. Even more striking is how unpredictability magnifies the loop. If you received something exciting every single time, predictability would dull the effect. But when the payoff comes at random, your brain keeps urging you to chase it. This turns each swipe or refresh into a gamble. Maybe this one will deliver. That nagging thought keeps you scrolling long past the point where logic says you should stop. It's the same conditioning slot machines exploit. A cycle of intermittent reinforcement that leads to compulsive behavior. What makes this cycle even stronger is that algorithms are actively shaping its rhythm. The platforms decide when to reveal content and when to hold it back, timing each alert for maximum pull. If new notifications flowed immediately, they would lose their grip more quickly. By spacing them out, or releasing them at moments predicted to catch you off guard, the system simulates the unpredictability of gambling jackpots. The strategy keeps you engaged longer, by ensuring you never know when the next win will appear. The very motion of scrolling reflects this gambling design. Instead of pulling a physical lever, you swipe down, refreshing the stream with a flick of your thumb. Each flick could bring something interesting or nothing at all. That simple physical rhythm locks the cycle in place. Swipe, wait, reveal, repeat. Unlike the casino, though, this slot machine doesn't close at 2 a.m. or sit behind guarded doors. It's right next to your bed, your desk, your dinner plate. The most addictive system in the world has been built into the object you carry everywhere. Your body even begins to pulse with the same signals as habitual gambling. Notice how a notification sound raises your heart rate just a little, or how you get phantom vibrations when the phone hasn't buzzed at all. Over time, anticipation itself triggers physical responses before you've even touched the device. These are classic signs of a conditioned dopamine loop. The urge doesn't feel like a choice. It feels necessary, as if ignoring it would leave you on edge. Sometimes people blame themselves, thinking they lack discipline. But neuroscience shows this misunderstanding is part of the trap. It isn't a personal weakness that keeps you scrolling. It's operant conditioning, the same mechanism that keeps gamblers feeding machines after losing money. The randomness strengthens the attachment, even while outcomes remain disappointing. In other words, the cycle works because it makes you believe the next check might pay off more than the last. Researchers studying this effect have found telling parallels. fMRI studies have observed similar activity in the brain's reward centers during heavy phone use as during gambling. Patterns in reward circuitry light up in ways that reflect comparable motivations, even though the behavior isn't chemically the same as drug use. This evidence reinforces what daily life already shows. The neural machinery for craving gets pulled in identical directions by phones and slot machines. That's why labeling it laziness doesn't capture what's happening. Sitting at a slot machine for 6 hours is called addiction because the structure of the game drives compulsive behavior. By that standard, phones are constructed on the same architecture, only placed in your pocket instead of a casino. The difference is scope. Anyone can carry their own personal slot machine 24 hours a day and pull the lever hundreds of times without leaving home. The impact of this conditioning runs deeper than wasted time. Each cycle of anticipation and inconsistent reward reinforces pathways that favor short bursts of novelty over sustained focus. Over weeks and months, that rewiring makes it harder to stay with long tasks and easier to succumb to quick checks. Concentration doesn't only feel weaker, the brain literally adapts to prefer distraction. That restless itch, when quiet work feels unbearable, often reflects withdrawal from this very process. The longer the pattern continues, the harder uninterrupted focus becomes. Yet neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire, means nothing here is fixed. The same system that builds unhealthy loops can also be guided into healthier ones. The key difference is whether you continue playing by the casino's rules or learn how to disrupt the cycle at predictable points. Awareness is the first lever out. When you understand that each swipe is less about your choice and more about a designed conditioning loop, the problem stops looking like a failed habit and starts looking like manipulation. This shift reframes the question. Instead of why am I so weak, the better question becomes, how can I reset the loop? Because this isn't about moral failure, it's about a psychological system designed to keep you hooked. And science gives us tools to break it. We'll use that same science, the predictable rises and falls of craving, to flip the script with simple resets. But there's another layer to this design that makes breaking away even harder. Slot machines work by playing with uncertainty and reward, but phones weaponize something even more primal, the body's emergency response system. And once notifications start imitating danger cues, the pull becomes not just psychological but physiological. When notifications pretend to be emergencies, why does a vibration in your pocket make your body jolt as if there's a crisis unfolding? At first glance, it seems disproportionate. A meme in a group chat, a shipping confirmation, or a calendar reminder should not carry the same weight as a fire alarm. Yet the nervous system reacts automatically because it was built to treat sudden, unpredictable cues as potential threats. Modern notifications exploit that mechanism. Think about the environment our brains evolved in. A rustle in the grass could have meant a predator was stalking nearby. A sharp cry from someone in your group signaled danger. Quick reaction made the difference between life and death. Because of that evolutionary training, sudden noises, vibrations, or flashes are still tagged by the brain as urgent until proven safe. So when your desk buzzes or your pocket rings, the survival reflex activates first, explanation comes later. You don't get to choose this response. It fires before conscious thought has a chance to weigh in. This is where modern technology bends biology. Messages about dinner plans or an app notification about a sale hijack those same alert pathways. The body reacts by releasing cortisol and adrenaline, chemicals meant to prime you for rapid action. Heart rate ticks up, breathing shifts, muscles tighten slightly, readying you for a response. In real emergencies, those reactions prepare you to act. But applied to digital alerts, they simply keep you in a low-level state of unease. It's not that every notification equals a genuine threat. It's that they tap the same rapid alert circuitry wired to treat sudden signals as urgent. On their own, these spikes aren't destructive. The body is built to handle pressure in short bursts, then reset. The trouble is the repetition. Dozens or hundreds of cues every day prevent the reset from completing. Instead of easing back into a calm state, the nervous system is pulled toward readiness again and again. Over time, the background hum of stress hormones becomes the new baseline. The body quietly learns to live as if emergencies were unfolding nonstop, even though nothing of the sort is happening. That chronic activation has consequences. When the system stays in fight or flight mode, mental energy gets rerouted away from higher-level thought. Decision-making depends heavily on the prefrontal cortex, But under stress hormone influence, that part of the brain loses access to its full capacity. The results are subtle, rash choices, shorter patience, and an almost default tendency to fall back on familiar habits. This is why a notification might not just steal 30 seconds of your attention, but leave you stumbling into distraction long after. Even when the alert is gone, the hormones linger. Multiply this by the average day of constant interruptions, and the cost grows visible. Each alert is essentially a mini-fire alarm without resolution. Real threats eventually close. Predator gone, fire contained, danger handled. Your body comes back to balance. With phone alerts that natural arc stalls. They trigger the surge, but no genuine crisis resolves it, leaving stress chemicals cycling in your system. The conscious mind may shrug things off, but physiologically, you've been drafted into a series of emergencies that don't exist. This strain spreads into daily life. Work feels heavier than it should. Concentration breaks more easily, not necessarily from lack of discipline, but because attention is operating under stress chemistry. Sleep quality declines, hormones that should taper off by evening stay elevated. Even relationships can take a hit because small irritations feel larger when nerves are already primed. People often chalk up the exhaustion to being busy, but often the body is simply overstimulated by false alarms layered across the day. Another way to see it is through the lens of cognitive bandwidth. Imagine your ability to think, plan, create, and regulate emotions as a fixed daily budget of energy. Stress responses cost significantly more from that budget than calm states. Every notification effectively withdraws resources from your account, even if the alert itself takes seconds. After hundreds of withdrawals in a single day, it's not surprising that by evening focus feels depleted. To your biology, you already spent the day tracking countless threats, even when nothing serious occurred. What follows from this is decision fatigue. After exhausting energy on hundreds of small alarms, choosing what to eat or how to spend your evening feels harder. That end-of-day fog isn't just tiredness, it's the psychological cost of staying in survival mode too long. You still go about your responsibilities, but the quality of choices declines. Distraction feels irresistible, and meaningful work gets pushed off again. This is why it's misleading to describe the effect as simple distraction. The issue isn't just scattered attention, it's structural rewiring toward constant microstress. Notifications don't just take minutes from your day, they take calm, focus, and creativity by recruiting the machinery built for genuine danger and applying it things trivial. You feel restless not because your task is boring, but because your body has been conditioned to sit at the edge of alertness all day long. The good news is that the loop can be interrupted. Just as each unexpected cue activates your nervous system automatically, you can reduce how many times that switch is flipped in the first place. A fast, practical fix is straightforward. Remove unnecessary cues. Turn off non-essential notifications, or schedule do not disturb blocks for periods when your attention matters most. By cutting down on the number of false alarms, you give your system more chances to return to balance. Research consistently shows that lowering interruptions not only reduces stress load, but helps restore access to deeper focus across the day. It helps to see the effect clearly. That chime in the corner isn't neutral, and it isn't just mildly inconvenient. It carries the weight of millions of years of evolution, designed so that anything sudden could override your priorities. In today's world, that function is hijacked not to save your life, but to win your attention. Understanding this and making small, intentional changes to when and how notifications reach you creates the conditions for clearer thinking. Still, even with fewer alerts, cravings to check don't vanish on their own. Biology remembers the loop. That's why simply silencing the phone often leaves you uneasy, waiting for something you might be missing. Reducing cues quiets the external triggers, but internal urges often remain. And that's where having a reliable practice to redirect attention in the moment becomes essential. Because the real challenge is not just hearing your phone less, but finding a way to dissolve that craving when it strikes. And there is one surprisingly simple technique that can do exactly that in less than half a minute. The 5-4-3-2-1 Reset Upgrade. There's a simple practice that can pull you out of the craving cycle without hiding your phone or forcing yourself into a battle of willpower. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 Reset Upgrade, a clinically supported grounding technique often used by therapists to help people manage anxiety and cravings. The reason it works is straightforward. You're replacing the digital stimulus loop with a full-body sensory reset, the kind your nervous system simply cannot ignore. Here's the sequence. Start by naming 5 specific things you can see. They don't need to be extraordinary. A scratch on your desk, the edge of a book, the shadow against the wall, a half-drained coffee cup, or the thread pattern on a cushion. When you look deliberately for details, your brain has to allocate attention toward registering what's physically present, which quiets the what-if pull of your phone. Next, move into the physical sense of touch by noticing 4 things you can feel: the weight of your body on the chair, the texture of your shirt against your arm, the cool surface under your hand, the temperature of the room brushing across your skin. Listening comes next. Identify 3 distinct sounds you can hear. Maybe it's a car rushing by outside, a fan running in the corner, or even the subtle hum of your computer. These sounds often fade into the background, but by focusing on them, you anchor yourself in real space and time rather than letting your thoughts orbit digital anticipation. Shift again, this time to smell. Notice 2 things. Perhaps the faint scent of soap, the aroma of paper, or whatever food lingers in the room. Finally, end with your sense of taste. Pay attention to what's left in your mouth, maybe the aftertaste of water or coffee. That's the close of the loop. 5 senses, all engaged. The effectiveness comes from how the brain processes input. You can't fully engage your senses and simultaneously keep fueling the craving loop around checking notifications. Attention is a finite system. Clinical sources like Calm and Verywell Mind describe sensory grounding as one of the most effective, immediate ways to reduce craving intensity in the short term. It doesn't erase urges forever, but for that moment, it suspends the cycle and clears space for control. But here's the catch. Most people stop after the reset, feel a little calmer, and then slip right back to their phones. The grounding works, but unless you direct that clarity into something concrete, the habit loop reasserts itself quickly. That's where the upgrade becomes important. After you ground, take one concrete 2-minute action, write a quick note you want to remember, schedule one task you've been putting off, capture a single idea before it slips away. The point is to replace the old habit chain with a new one. Craving arises, you ground your senses, and then you funnel the freed up attention into a productive micro-task. Think of it as redirecting energy instead of trying to deny it. That restless impulse holds tension. If you attempt to suppress it, the effort itself fuels the craving. But if you link the craving to a useful outlet, you redirect the same tension into forward motion. Your brain begins to construct a new pattern. I feel the urge, I ground, I act. Over time, the cycle reinforces itself with payoffs that phones can't match, a feeling of calm plus the satisfaction of progress. That's how reconditioning starts, by shifting tiny, closed loops from compulsive distraction into constructive direction. The beautiful thing is its speed. The entire reset takes less time than opening an app, scrolling briefly, and setting the phone down. 30 to 40 seconds is often enough to move through all 5 senses. That small gap interrupts the automatic reflex and replaces it with presence. Because of its brevity, you can use it anywhere, at your desk before reflexively reaching, while waiting in line, while lying in bed, or even mid-conversation when your attention starts to wander. This technique also sidesteps the problem of resistance. When you tell yourself not to check your phone, you create inner conflict. The struggle itself makes the craving feel stronger. But grounding bypasses that battle by giving your attention an alternate task. You're not saying don't, you're saying do this instead. And your sensory system, with its limited capacity, can't run both processes at once. By loading the brain with real sensory data, you crowd out the craving thread. Here's a way to internalize it further. Practice it interactively. The next time the urge hits, you can even guide yourself out loud. Repeat the simple formula. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. Do it with me. 5 things you see right now. Naming them anchors the process, and saying it out loud makes it stick. These micro-practices embed themselves faster when you physically act them out rather than just keeping them in your head. With repetition, the reset starts to reshape your habits. Each time you use it, you weaken the automatic link between urge and scroll. Neural pathways encode through practice. Where once the sequence was, urge right arrow app, it becomes urge right arrow ground right arrow micro task. The payoffs, though small, compound. A note captured here, a task clarified there, an idea written down before it evaporates. Over time, those actions accumulate into meaningful momentum. That slow build is the quiet opposite of the hours lost to feeds. It's important to recognize that the upgrade isn't about creating huge productivity in every instance. Sometimes the micro-task is as simple as taking a breath, standing up, or setting a reminder for later. The benefit is in consistency, not scale. The craving stops being something to fear or suppress and instead becomes a reliable signal. Here's an opportunity to ground and redirect. Eventually, even the moment of craving itself changes character. Instead of feeling like a leash pulling you, it becomes a prompt for mastery. Every application of the reset is a small reclaiming of self-regulation. You win back focus not in chunks of hours, but in dozens of short recoveries stacked together. And those sheer repetitions are what signal your brain, this is the new baseline. You're no longer hijacked by the default slot machine rhythm of notifications. You're shaping a counter-rhythm, one built from quick resets and actions stacked like building blocks. This is why grounding techniques are used in clinical contexts for far more difficult challenges than phone checking. If they can help people navigate panic or manage compulsive behaviors, the same structure can easily be adapted to digital overuse. The core principle is the same. Use present-moment sensory data to override autopilot loops. And when tied to even the tiniest act of follow-through, the pattern strengthens enough to carry you out of the digital cycle. What you'll notice, if you practice regularly, is that the urge to check doesn't feel as sharp as before. Physiological cravings peak and taper, and by giving them a short sensory pause, you let the peak pass without being dragged along. The grounding doesn't eliminate your phone's pull entirely, but it breaks the automatic handoff. You no longer accept the first impulse as inevitable. You insert choice where there used to be reflex. And this is the bridge to the next step. Once you experience that small victory, the craving rising, grounding it down, redirecting it into something useful, you start to wonder whether the same can be applied in slightly longer windows. Because if a few seconds of grounding can interrupt the loop, then stretching that pause just a little further could reshape the habit even more. And that length of pause turns out to be just enough to retrain the checking reflex at its roots. Breaking the checking loop with the 2-minute rule. The next step isn't about distraction management in the moment, it's about teaching your brain a new rhythm of response. This is where the 2-minute rule comes in, a method borrowed and adapted from James Clear's well-known habit strategy. Clear's core idea is simple. Scale any new habit down to a gateway action that takes only 2 minutes, like putting on your shoes if your aim is to run, or opening a notebook if your goal is to study. That's your entry point. But the same principle works in reverse when handling cravings. Instead of acting instantly, you commit to waiting just 2 minutes before giving in. 2 minutes may be tiny, but it's enough to change the story your brain tells about urgency. Here's why that window matters. Cravings, including the compulsion to check your phone, operate like waves. They don't stay constant. They rise quickly, peak, and then weaken if you don't immediately react. What feels unbearable for a moment is short-lived chemistry. The 2-minute pause lets that wave crest and recede on its own without you feeding it. So instead of reinforcing the loop, buzz, swipe, reward, you stretch it until the urgency naturally fizzles out. Over time, the brain learns the craving isn't a permanent state and doesn't require automatic action. In practice, this means the moment you feel the tug to grab your phone, you deliberately delay. You don't shout no at yourself or grit your teeth. You acknowledge the urge, then put responsibility into the clock. Just wait 2 minutes. Fill the time with something light, sip water, take a breath, glance around the room, or jot down a quick note. The point isn't to be busy. It's to experience how the craving dissolves without you obeying it. Think about the times you've let a buzzing phone sit for a while. At first, your hand twitches toward it, but then, a few moments later, the pull was weaker. That's the principle happening naturally. The difference here is that you turn it into a system instead of an accident. Each time you ride out those 2 minutes, you're training your nervous system that relief doesn't come from unlocking your phone. It comes from staying put. That's habit rewiring at the most basic level. The checking loop feels relentless because the action follows so quickly after the stimulus. In most cases, less than a second separates urge from swipe. The brain learns speed, not meaning. By adding a 2-minute buffer, you interrupt that rhythm. A pause that long converts an automatic impulse into a conscious one, dragging the behavior out of autopilot and into plain awareness. And once you can consistently say, "I'll wait," you've already weakened the cycle. Starting out, that pause won't always feel easy. Your brain will fire off excuses. What if it's urgent? I'll only check for a second. This is normal resistance, not proof of failure. Think of it like lifting small weights. At first, even 5 pounds feels awkward. But with repetition, the same load becomes nothing. Resisting for 2 minutes trains your regulation muscles the same way. The repetition is the growth, not the occasional discomfort. This also aligns with the second version of Clear's idea, the do it for 2 minutes then stop technique. Sometimes delaying the habit isn't what you need. Sometimes beginning for 2 minutes lowers the barrier. For instance, if you dread starting an assignment, commit to opening the document and typing for just 2 minutes. If you want to jog, tie your shoes and step outside for 2 minutes. Often the hardest part is initiation, and once you're in motion, momentum carries you. So there are two flips of the same coin here. 2 minutes to delay cravings you want less of, or 2 minutes to ease into habits you want more of. Both approaches use the same psychological lever, lowering what feels impossible into a negligible time frame. A quick example makes it easier to see. Imagine you're a student heading to class with an assignment looming. The gateway part of the rule might be opening your notes 2 minutes before class starts. You don't have to finish reading, but just flipping to the first page primes your brain. Or if you're trying to build a gym routine, the 2-minute gateway is tying your shoes or filling a water bottle. No debate, no delay, just the smallest possible action. Over time, the association is automatic. Gateway equals starting. Do the same in reverse for phone cravings. Feel the tug, pause 2 minutes, let it die. It's worth noting that this tool can tilt the wrong way if you misuse it. Author Laura Vanderkam has pointed out a flaw in the 2-minute rule, when people use it as justification for endlessly batching trivial quick wins. If you keep clearing emails or folding laundry because they take less than 2 minutes, you can end up with whole hours of time consumed by small tasks, leaving nothing for deep, meaningful work. That's why you need a boundary. Use the 2-minute rule for priming or pausing, but don't let it eat into your long stretches of focus. A simple safeguard is to set contexts. Use the rule to launch big tasks or to disrupt cravings, but don't run it inside a block you've reserved for deep work. Otherwise, the small will cannibalize the significant. What makes this strategy powerful over days and weeks is compounding. Day 1, you resist for 2 minutes, then check anyway. That's still progress because you've seen the craving lose steam. Day 5, some urges no longer feel worth acting on once the minutes are up. Day 14, your brain already starts associating the tug with delay. The loop rewires. Notification equals pause, not notification equals scroll. By then, you're not forcing discipline. You've built a reflex that favors waiting over reacting. The approach combines seamlessly with the reset technique from before. Feel the urge, promise to wait 2 minutes, and during the wait, do a 5-4-3-2-1 grounding run. By the time you're done, both minutes have passed and the craving wave is gone. Or, if you'd rather, insert a micro-task in the gap. Pour a glass of water, write a single line, stand and stretch. The craving is not just resisted, it's redirected into something that leaves a residue of progress. Small shifts like this accumulate, while constant shortcuts online never do. Over time, writing out compulsions this way spreads beyond phones. The same rising and fading pattern drives snacking, procrastination, and other distractions. Recognizing that every urge contains its own expiration date lets you treat impulses with less weight. You don't resist forever, only for a few moments. And that subtle change makes them manageable. You stop negotiating with yourself about permanent bans and practice tolerating discomfort in small, repeatable doses. This is the essence of mental conditioning. Reshape one loop, and the logic transfers to others. Habits don't live in isolation. The patience you build waiting to check a notification also supports you when starting difficult work, resisting comfort eating, or staying calm during minor stress triggers. 2 minutes becomes the core unit of control, scalable into any habit landscape you want to reshape. In the end, the 2-minute rule is not about standing guard against your phone forever. It's about shrinking control problems into solvable windows. When the urgent buzz arrives, it feels larger than you. But anyone can wait out 2 minutes, and 2 minutes at a time is enough to dismantle the reflex. Once cravings prove weaker than you thought, the grip loosens. You realize the loop isn't steel, it's habit, and habit bends when exposed to structure. Building these pauses shows that control isn't just a matter of effort, it's also about structure. And when you start thinking in terms of structure, another question rises. What if control over focus has less to do with inner willpower and more to do with the environment sitting right around you? Designing your space for focus. Sometimes the difference between staying on track and slipping into distraction isn't inside your head, it's right in your surroundings. Designing your space for focus matters more than most people realize. You can have all the motivation in the world, but if your environment constantly pushes you toward checking your phone, you're asking too much of willpower. The structure around you decides whether focus feels natural or whether it feels like a constant uphill fight. Start with the simplest move. Take your phone out of the bedroom. Studies link keeping a phone by the bed with worse sleep quality, later bedtimes, and shorter rest overall. That glowing screen tempts you into one last scroll even when you promised yourself you'd turn in early. And even if you resist, your body still reacts to the presence of the device, leaving you more restless than you realize. By moving the phone to a designated charging spot outside your room, a hallway table or kitchen counter, sleep becomes less about negotiating with yourself and more about giving your brain uninterrupted recovery time. A small change here has big ripple effects on how refreshed and focused you feel the next day. To make this easier, give your environment a nudge in the right direction. Instead of just removing your phone, replace the function it pretends to serve. If you currently rely on it as an alarm, swap it for a low-tech alarm clock on your nightstand. That way, you're not negotiating each morning with a glowing slab of distractions seconds after waking up. The default choice shifts. Wake up, stand up, move forward, not swipe open and lose half an hour. When you make the healthy option physically simpler than the distracting one, you tip the odds toward focus without draining effort. The same principle carries into your workday. If your phone lives right on your desk during tasks, you're essentially working beside a mental open loop. Even if it's silent and screen down, your brain quietly remembers it's there, pulling a portion of attention toward what you might be missing. Psychologists call this attentional drag, energy spent monitoring possibilities instead of finishing the job in front of you. Changing this doesn't demand willpower, just distance. Put the phone in a drawer, slip it into your bag, or better yet, set up a charging station across the room. The added friction of having to stand up, break posture, and walk over is usually enough for the craving to pass before you even reach for it. Think of it like leaving a candy jar in another room. When it's on the desk, you barely notice your hand dipping in, one piece at a time, until you've cleared half the jar. Move it 30 steps away, and suddenly that same impulse starts to feel like effort. That hesitation is everything. It interrupts the automatic nature of the habit and gives you a chance to override it without staging an inner battle. The phone works the same way. A little distance forces the craving to compete with physical movement, which most people will skip once the urgency dies down seconds later. There's another hidden factor: visibility. Research shows that simply having a phone in sight, even when unused, reduces cognitive capacity. Your brain treats it like an unresolved question, should I, will I, without you ever realizing. That means leaving your phone upside down on the desk isn't neutral, it's still taxing part of your mental budget. The fix is straightforward: go for invisibility. Put it in a drawer, slip it behind a book, or cover it with a notebook. Even such small barriers reduce the constant reminder and leave more bandwidth for actual work. Screens themselves can also be softened. Some people find setting their phones to grayscale helps undercut the appeal. Colorful icons and vivid alerts are designed to draw the eye, so stripping the screen of that visual punch makes each glance less rewarding. While grayscale won't cure distraction by itself, it reduces the instant pull long enough for other environment changes to hold. Combined with distance and invisibility, it helps turn the phone into a neutral object instead of a flashing lottery card sitting in reach. Once you start adjusting environment, the principle applies more broadly. A cluttered desk isn't just messy, it's a visual reminder of every unfinished task. Each pile competes for brain space, making it harder to sink into a single project. That's why a clear surface feels relieving. You're not just tidying, you're reducing cognitive load. The same goes for entertainment devices in your workspace. Keeping a gaming console across the room from where you work means temptation shadows your focus all day. Shifting those items into different zones of the house sets invisible boundaries. Work should happen in one landscape, leisure in another. Mixing both only ensures you're constantly negotiating attention. Your digital environment demands the same care. If your laptop lights up with incoming chats or shortcuts to your favorite distractions sit right on your home screen, you've done the equivalent of stacking candy bars on your keyboard. Redesign here means making focus tools easy to reach while tucking distractions out of daily sight. That might mean logging out of messaging apps before serious work, creating a separate browser profile purely for work tabs, or moving social icons several clicks away. By doing this once, you save yourself dozens of moments where effort would otherwise be spent saying no. The payoff begins to compound. With the phone out of your bedroom, mornings start calmer. With the device away from your desk, work hours feel less fractured. With clutter cleared and apps hidden, mental drag decreases. Focus no longer comes from fighting impulses in the moment. It flows because the environment has already made the right choice for you. That not only reduces exhaustion, but also preserves willpower for moments that truly demand it. Creative breakthroughs, tough conversations, long-term persistence. Here's a lighter way to frame it. Instead of thinking of your phone as a clingy ex you need to constantly push away, treat it like a noisy neighbor. You don't invite them into every meal or meeting. You let them stay at their own place so you can enjoy peace in yours. Shift the phone into its own designated space, away from the center of your life, and you're no longer in constant negotiation. It's still nearby for when you need it, but it's not sitting at the table asking for attention every 5 minutes. The bigger picture is that environment silently scripts behavior. You don't need to negotiate with your impulses every time they flare up. Instead, you can arrange your surroundings so those impulses never play at full strength to begin with. Focus stops being about superhuman discipline and starts being about invisible architecture. Every placement decision, where the phone rests, what's visible on the desk, what cues line your screen, acts like a lever shaping what your brain treats as default. And once defaults are on your side, the fight with distraction feels less like resistance and more like relief. You conserve energy, work feels cleaner, and you have more bandwidth left for what actually matters. The next layer of strategy, then, is not just about removing temptations, but about aligning your work sessions with how your brain already cycles through attention. Because just as environment has a rhythm, so does your focus, and learning to work with it rather than against it changes everything. Time blocking the way your brain likes it. Instead of relying on raw effort to control your schedule, you can arrange your time to move with your brain's natural rhythm. This is where time blocking, done the way your brain actually likes it, becomes a real tool instead of just another calendar system. Most of us imagine focus as a switch. Sit down, turn it on, and keep it running as long as possible. But attention doesn't work like that. Concentration comes in waves that rise and fall about every 90 minutes. These are called ultradian rhythms, and they're built into your biology. You've felt them before, the first stretch where you're sharp and efficient, followed by the dip where you suddenly feel restless, start yawning, or drift toward distractions. That dip isn't laziness. It's your brain signaling that the block has ended. Think of how work feels across a day. At the start of a session, things click more easily. 20 minutes in, you're locked in. Around the halfway mark of an hour, cracks appear, fidgeting, glancing at tabs, mental drift. Push 60 to 90 minutes and fatigue sets in. Most people override that by forcing through or task switching, but brute force against biology rarely works. The outcome is sloppy progress and exhaustion. Aligning your schedule with those waves flips the situation. You're not grinding harder, you're swimming with the current. Research backs the range, too. Productivity experts often recommend focused work intervals anywhere from 25 minutes on the short end to 90 minutes at full length. The key isn't sticking to one fixed number, but matching the block to the type of work. A quick email burst, 25 minutes with a 5-minute rest works well. Drafting a paper or planning a project, you may need 90 minutes of uninterrupted focus before you return for a full reset break. In other words, block size follows task difficulty. This is where methods like the Pomodoro technique come into play. Pomodoro uses 25 minutes of focused effort with a 5-minute pause. It's accessible, especially when you're starting out or handling tasks that feel overwhelming. For those able to sustain longer arcs, the 90-minute model captures the full wave of peak concentration, followed by a meaningful recovery pause of 15 to 20 minutes. Some people alternate. Shorter bursts during admin-heavy stretches of the day, longer arcs when tackling demanding creative or analytical work. The trade-off is flexibility. Choose the tool based on what fits the task and your current energy levels. Let's run an example. Say you're writing an essay. Instead of chopping that work into multiple 10-minute slices between other obligations, you schedule a clean 90-minute block. Phone out of reach, notifications silenced, one document open. The first part feels like warming up, ideas forming halfway in, then flow taking over. You lose sense of time until fatigue cues you around minute 75. Rather than fighting further, you end at 90, stand up, and reset. When you come back after a break, the momentum is easier to pick up because the brain had time to consolidate. Now compare that to trying to fill 10 minutes between chats. You never reach the deep layer where things feel almost effortless. If 90 minutes feels out of range, scale down. Many with ADHD, for instance, find that expecting long blocks creates failure loops. In that case, use 15 30-minute cycles, which are already adapted in ADHD-friendly versions of Pomodoro. Shorter sprints create achievable wins, and over time, some may grow those into longer arcs. The point is choice. Your schedule bends to your attention rhythm instead of pretending everybody operates the same way. Another adjustment is when you schedule blocks. Energy isn't flat, it tends to peak earlier in the day. For most people, mornings are prime ground for deep work. That's when you should block 1 or 2 sessions for demanding tasks: coding, design, writing, planning. Save the valleys of attention for lower stakes activity, like answering DMs, organizing chores, or handling calendar invites. That way you're not wasting your sharpest hours on shallow output, leaving no clarity left for projects that actually require it. Time blocking also kills multitasking at its root. When you explicitly schedule a 90-minute wave for one task, you set context. You're not choosing between 5 things mid-block, you've already decided on one. Shallow tasks cluster outside that window, grouped together in lighter blocks later. This batching removes constant start-stop momentum shifts. Instead of restarting flow every few minutes, you arrive and stay long enough for creativity or precision to kick in. Rest is the glue that holds all this together. People often skip recovery, assuming breaks are indulgence, but the brain relies on them. Those 15 to 20 minutes between 90-minute waves aren't wasted, they're the moment your mind files short-term work into longer-term memory and recharges attention. Skip them, and the next block collapses sooner. Even with short bursts like Pomodoro, that 5-minute pause exists for a reason. Rest isn't the absence of productivity, it's the condition that makes the next round possible. Notice how this alters the view of a calendar. Standard schedules are chopped into half-hour rectangles, an architecture that ignores how cognition actually flows. If you can reorganize a day around 2 or 3 major focus waves with built-in breaks, then slot lighter clusters in the dips, you experience both efficiency and lower fatigue. Fewer things will spill into overtime because deep tasks shrink when done in aligned states. The payoff arrives quickly: less scattered starts, smoother focus, better creative leaps, and crucially, more energy left at the end of the day. Instead of feeling wrung out by lunch, you still have something left to give by evening, which matters if you're balancing study, work, and social life. Matching task weight to focus cycles is not about doing more hours, it's about getting more traction from the hours you already have. The mistake would be expecting perfection immediately. Schedules always leak. A meeting cuts into a wave. A notification interrupts. That's expected. The value grows from repetition, not flawless setups. Each time you resist the extra task mid-block and return focus, you strengthen the pattern. Each real break instead of mindless scrolling reinforces rest instead of noise. That accumulation builds a foundation. So time blocking in sync with your brain isn't a rigid formula. It's a framework you can experiment with: 25 minutes, 45 minutes, 90 minutes, until you find your personal arc. It draws from biology, productivity research, and lived trial. And once blocks start feeling natural, you realize the external noise isn't the only thing stealing attention. The inner reflex to reach for distraction fills any void you leave. Managing those impulses requires not just structure over your time, but deliberate replacements for every urge to check. That's the next step. what you choose to do in the exact moment your hand twitches toward the phone. The productive replacement switch. What unlocks real change isn't trying harder to suppress cravings, but learning to channel them. That's where the productive replacement switch comes in. The idea is simple. Every time you feel the impulse to scroll, you swap it with a pre-chosen microtask, something small enough to finish in the same time a quick scroll would have taken, but meaningful enough to leave a trace of progress. It's not about fighting the urge until it breaks you, it's about redirecting it. When your brain demands relief, you give it relief, only on your terms. This is why replacement works better than elimination. If you just try to cut out scrolling with nothing to fill the gap, your brain resists. Habits hate empty windows. Remove the instant outlet without providing an alternative, and the craving grows louder, not weaker. Substitution is the key. Small actions that deliver relief while steering your energy toward useful outcomes. It isn't suppression, it's repurposing. Start by building a simple menu of pre-approved micro-replacements. These should be low effort, quick, and repeatable so you don't waste time deciding in the moment. For example, jot one sentence in a notes app. Open your calendar and schedule a single task you've been avoiding. Do a 2-minute stretch to ease tension. Read a single page of a book or highlight-lined article. Run a 2-minute language lesson in Duolingo. Clear one email from your inbox. Capture a stray idea that's been bubbling in your head before it drifts away. With 6 to 8 options like these ready, you can remove friction and ensure that your craving doesn't stall in indecision. Let's imagine how it works. You're waiting for a meeting to start. Instinct kicks in pocket, unlock, scroll. But instead of defaulting to a feed, you switch. You open your notes app, jot a thought, or check tomorrow's calendar. 30 seconds later, the meeting begins, and instead of wasting the gap, you've cleared clutter from your mind or taken small control of your responsibilities. At scale, these moments add up far more than you realize. The script to carry into those moments is short and practical. Swap 2 minutes, one small win. Repeat it whenever the pull arises. That line anchors the habit so you're not scrambling to remember what to do. Swap reminds you to redirect, not resist. 2 minutes sets the time boundary so the replacement feels doable. One small win promises the payoff, something checked, something cleared, something gained. Say the phrase as you catch the urge and act on it immediately. Over time, it becomes automatic. The real power of micro-replacements is in their accumulation. Taken individually, each action looks insignificant, but scroll urges don't happen once a day. They appear dozens of times, often more. If 30 cravings show up and just half are replaced, that's 15 productive micro-actions by default. 15 notes captured, stretches completed, emails cleared, pages read, tasks scheduled. Multiply that daily tally across weeks, and what once dissolved into distraction becomes a steady current of meaningful progress. The evidence from habit research is clear. Small, repeated actions compound faster than occasional bursts. It's true that replacements don't deliver the instant fireworks of a feed. Scrolling floods your brain with quick novelty. Micro-actions, at first, feel flat compared to flashing updates, but the satisfaction comes in a more durable form. Look back after 5 urges swapped with notes, stretches, and one-page reads, and you see progress where time used to vanish. The craving still gets answered, but instead of ending with regret, you're left with momentum. That difference builds confidence. Your urges aren't robbing you, they're serving you. This shift even ripples into social settings. Consider a lull in conversation over dinner. The instinct is to grab the phone, hide in a feed until the silence passes. But a replacement there is social. Ask the person a question you've been meaning to, or share a story you've put off. Instead of retreating, you engage. Over many repetitions, those moments stitch into stronger relationships because you've turned distraction impulses into prompts for connection. Skeptics sometimes worry that micro-replacements are too shallow to matter. But the standard alternative, scrolling, adds nothing at all. A cleared email, a calendar adjustment, a short language lesson, a single line of reflection, these add up into small but tangible wins. The cascade effect follows the math. 10 urges turned into 10 microtasks per day equals 60 or 70 per week. That volume of unfinished clutter redirected into action reshapes your life faster than you'd imagine. What seemed negligible becomes momentum, compounding quietly in the background. Over weeks of practice, the craving itself starts to shift meaning. At first, it feels like an itch to scratch. Later, you experience it as a resource to mine, the buzz or phantom vibration doesn't trigger guilt anymore, it cues opportunity. You begin to look forward to each urge because you've reframed it. What once hollowed out your time now fills it. That reframe dissolves the feeling of being trapped. Instead of being hijacked by impulse, you've enlisted the impulse into service. Notice how this makes the phone less central. Right now, devices on the first and last word on your time. They claim the spare seconds, dictate your reflexes, carve out your nightstand routines. By shifting urges into productive sparks, you loosen that hold. But environment still matters. Even with replacements, certain windows of the day remain fragile when your brain is at its most impressionable and your energy sets its strongest default. Those windows have the power to multiply this shift or undo it. And that's where the next adjustment becomes crucial. Reclaiming the first and last hour. The strongest lever you have to change your day isn't the middle, it's the bookends. Reclaiming the first and last hour of your day shapes how every other hour unfolds. Those windows act like anchors. What you do right after waking and right before sleeping sets the tone your mind carries into everything between. The challenge is that most people surrender these moments to their phones. That first grab of the device in the morning and the final scroll before bed feel routine. But in practice, they dictate whether your days run with intent or drift into reaction. Mornings are the most fragile point. In the first minutes after waking, your brain is shifting from slow, restorative rhythms into alert states. Think of it as coming online, slowly powering up. The input you choose in this window teaches your nervous system what mode to run in. Open a phone and you're immediately flooded with demands, messages, headlines, alerts. That flood doesn't just wake you up, it primes your brain to react instead of create. One glance snowballs. Instead of deciding the morning yourself, you live the priorities flashing from a screen. That cycle rarely breaks once it starts. The alternative is simple but powerful. Skip the device in that vulnerable hour and start with something physical and present. Drink water, stretch, step outside for fresh air. Even 2 or 3 minutes of low-effort journaling or planning creates a steadier launch. Researchers and media psychologists point out that mornings free from digital input improve both mood and creative output. Your mind gets the chance to wander, form its own connections, and generate ideas instead of just consuming headlines or updates. By opening with tasks anchored in your own priorities, writing a line, reviewing a plan, you strengthen the muscles of focus before friction even arrives. Of course, many people explain that they need their phone by the bed as an alarm. That's solvable. Use an analog clock on your nightstand or even a basic, dumb phone that does nothing but ring at a set time. The Times and productivity sources consistently recommend this $5 swap because it removes the primary excuse while cutting off the reflex to swipe open a glowing screen. Even the act of reaching for a different device in the morning breaks the loop, preventing the chain from starting. Another option is to place your smartphone in the kitchen overnight. That way, you must physically leave your room to see it, a design tweak that delays input by at least an hour. With those safeguards, the morning shifts from default reaction into deliberate control. Evenings mirror the same pattern in reverse. As bedtime approaches, your brain prepares for rest by lowering arousal and slowing frequency. The last input you allow into this state carries more force than you realize. If you end the day with feeds or flashing screens, you pump fresh stimulation into a system trying to quiet down. That delays sleep onset and makes what rest you do get lighter and less restorative. Over time, the debt leaves mornings heavier and concentration thinner, pulling the loop tighter. The light from screens delivers another silent blow. Blue spectrum light tricks the brain into delaying melatonin release, which is the hormone that signals readiness for sleep. A late-night scroll doesn't just steal minutes, it interrupts the neurochemistry that lets your body drop into proper rest. That's why many wake up feeling tired despite technically getting enough hours. The depth wasn't there because the inputs before bed kept the nervous system too alert. There's also the question of what information you close the day with. News alerts, dramatic exchanges on social media, endless short videos, none of these offer calm closure. Instead of winding down, your thoughts fragment, leaving subconscious residue that lingers into the next day. What you see last often replays in your head, sometimes through dreams, sometimes in morning moods. Clutter your mind with noise at night, and you wake to scattered attention in the morning. The remedy parallels the morning structure. Set a clear off-ramp for digital input, About 60 minutes before sleep, place your phone in another room. If you need it accessible for emergencies, reduce stimulation by silencing apps, flipping the screen face down, and placing it out of sight. Then transition into analog routines. Light reading, stretching, journaling, or even simple conversation replaces input with wind-down activities. The benefit is twofold. First, you teach your mind what to expect, giving your body consistent signals for rest. Second, you cut off the brain's demand for novelty, which helps attention settle into clarity. Most people underestimate how strong the pull is during these hours, not because of weakness, but because of vulnerability. In the morning, you're groggy, running on low effort, and the phone gives immediate stimulation. At night, you're depleted, looking for something easy. Either way, you're in the exact state where convenience wins. Designing around that fact matters. If the device isn't nearby, or if an analog option stands in its place, you never face the hardest part of the habit loop. Try this structure for a single day. Phone in the kitchen at night, cheap alarm next to bed. On waking, drink water, stretch, then write down one task you want finished. Leave the phone untouched for an hour. At night, close all feeds an hour before sleep, write one line reviewing what worked during the day, then read 2 pages of a physical book. It's just 2 short windows you've reclaimed. Yet by framing the morning with clarity and the evening with closure, you give yourself margins of calm that bleed into every other moment. Compare that day with a standard pattern of waking to alerts and falling asleep in front of feeds. The structure isn't difficult, but the trajectory diverges completely. And here's the real significance. Those 2 windows don't just control your energy, they control your sense of agency. The act of starting and ending the day on your own terms builds a foundation of consistency. Even if the middle hours get messy with obligations and distractions, those margins belong to you. They aren't stolen minutes, they're reclaimed territory. Consistency matters because it reminds your nervous system what control feels like. You don't need everything perfect. You need just enough anchors for order to spread outward. Some dismiss morning and evening rituals as lifestyle extras. In practice, they're structural necessities. They buffer your brain against the constant pull of stimuli, reset your nervous system daily, and protect the hours when impulses are hardest to resist. On paper, it's only 120 minutes free of devices. In reality, it's the leverage point that tilts the remaining 1,320. The surprising part is how quickly you notice it. Within a few days of parking your phone outside the bedroom and closing your evenings with analog activities, mornings feel lighter. Ideas surface faster, frustrations shrink, concentration runs steadier. Creativity doesn't have to fight so hard for space because the space already exists. Evenings feel calmer. Sleep comes faster. It isn't dramatic transformation, but a subtle strengthening. Little by little, reintroducing calm at the edges restores calm at the center. When you combine this with the other practices, delays, grounding, environmental cues, you create a web of small choices. Each by itself seems almost too simple, but together the gains compound. Night shifts into day differently, mornings set priorities more clearly, each urge bends into direction instead of distraction. The process proves that you don't need sweeping change to start momentum. Sometimes the smallest anchor carries the greatest weight, nudging everything else into place. And that momentum is exactly what carries forward. The cascade effect of small wins. What begins to change everything isn't dramatic reinvention. It's the string of minor decisions that build on each other until they form something much larger than they looked at first. This is the idea behind the cascade effect of small wins, the way ordinary, almost forgettable choices accumulate into visible progress, and over time, reshape how you use your focus. The smallest example is delay. Each time you notice an itch to check your phone and respond with "I'll wait 2 minutes," you reclaim space. That pause seems trivial. Maybe it's just one fleeting urge redirected, but it alters what comes after. Instead of snapping your attention into fragments, you let one task run in a clean line. Mental energy that would have been drained gets preserved. You notice you move through writing with less friction, or that you solve a problem without hopping between screens. That ability to complete something without splintering your attention often traces back to a single tiny decision, not acting on impulse right away. Delay compounds. Grounding functions on the same principle. The 5 senses reset does more than ease one craving in isolation. By pulling presence back into the moment, You cut off attention residue before it spreads into the next block of work. Without that half-focused, restless afterglow, the next 30 minutes or even hour run cleaner. You think in straighter lines. You experience a moment of calm without needing to drop back into your feed. Sometimes it looks as if the reset saved only 30 seconds, but it preserves much more. It stops one slip from cascading outward into an entire block of broken concentration. Productive replacements add another layer. Each swap is small, stretching for a moment, scheduling a micro-task, jotting one line into notes, clearing a single email. One looks like nothing, but count 40 or 50 of them across a week. You now have physical relief from mini stretches, an inbox that feels less suffocating, and a page of ideas that never would have existed otherwise. Those wins amount to a slow but steady accumulation. They don't demand long commitments. They simply redirect energy that would have poured into nothing. Over time, the tally proves to you that urges are energy you can claim rather than noise you have to endure. This is the mechanics of compounding. Like interest growing on deposits, the micro-decisions you repeat amplify over time. Individually, they appear too minor to matter. Yet strung together, the result feels like more clarity, more calm, and more meaningful work. By the end of 1 week, conversations feel deeper because you're not half-monitoring a feed. By a month, creativity begins strengthening because thoughts aren't constantly interrupted. It's a shift that sneaks up because no single act carries the weight. Together, the habits stitch into consistency. Consider the contrast. Living always tethered to notifications makes presence unusual. Silence feels uncomfortable. A walk without a phone feels incomplete. A dinner conversation itches at the edges of your mind, waiting for the next buzz. These conditions convince you that distraction is normal. But what you discover once you collect small wins across the day is that presence returns as the default state. You give attention freely, patience comes more easily, and the underlying anxiety dissolves. Others notice it too. People feel when your attention is unbroken, and that quality becomes rare enough to stand out. In team settings, classrooms, or relationships, focus itself becomes a competitive advantage. The cascade effect works in every direction. Tiny resets build stronger stretches of work. Small swaps reclaim minutes into tasks. Even microlearning examples show the same pattern. 10 or 15 minutes reading a summary on Headway or Blinkist per day seems trivial. But as weeks stack, that filler time turns into chapters read, skills upgraded, or new ideas seeded, outcomes that never happen when those same minutes vanish into doom scrolling. The difference isn't time, it's how often your wins reinforce each other. Notice the shift in identity that appears once you accumulate enough entries. You stop labeling yourself as someone with bad focus. You start collecting evidence of being deliberate with your choices. Each note jotted, each stretch performed, each series of urges delayed strengthens that identity. It's not about sudden transformation. It's about small acts of ownership, repeated until they feel normal. When you believe your attention is under your direction, not a slot machine's design, that belief supports clearer focus and more consistent progress, even if technology still surrounds you. Think of the brick analogy. One brick is negligible, but lay brick after brick and structure rises. The 2-minute delays, the 30-second resets, the mini replacements, the phone-free edges of your day, each of these is one brick. Together, they build a protective structure strong enough to shield focus from the constant drag of devices. And because the structure forms gradually, it doesn't feel painful or overwhelming. You realize what looked like minor behavior has hardened into systems that now carry your attention for you. This is why presence becomes valuable. In an environment where most people run scattered across dozens of inputs, delivering undivided focus stands out. Imagine presenting in a meeting and actually paying attention to colleagues without fractured glances, or ending a day with progress visible instead of wondering where hours went. Being present is no longer standard. It's rare, and rare skills are valuable. What once felt like a fight to resist distraction becomes a position of advantage, built from nothing more than daily micro-choices adding up. If you want to test this cascade effect directly, try a weekend micro-challenge. Each time you feel the tug to check your phone, run through a quick stack, a 2-minute delay, a 30-second 5-4-3-2-1 sense reset, and one small productive replacement. Aim to repeat this sequence 10 times across the span of a weekend. It totals less than an hour in practice, but it produces a surprising amount of reclaimed clarity. Come back and share in the comments how it shifted your perception of your own urges. That kind of practice does more than block distraction. It installs a proof of concept in your own routine. The significance of small wins is not that they guarantee permanent rewiring of the brain by themselves, but that they provide reliable evidence of progress. With repetition, they support stronger habits, clearer focus, and steadier attention that lasts longer than any single burst of discipline. By leaning on what feels achievable, you build the bedrock needed to maintain bigger commitments without burning out. In the end, what begins as a scattered list of techniques, delay, ground, replace, block time, reclaim the margins, stitches together into one coherent system. Each habit strengthens the others until focus feels protected by design, not drained by default. And once you see that cascade at work, you can't ignore it. It proves that you already have pieces of control within reach, and those pieces multiply when put to use. The only question left is how you choose to direct that control. Because attention is what everything else depends on, and what takes it from you shapes how you live. Your phone isn't the villain here, but letting it guide every micro-decision has cost you more than you realize. The reset tools, the 2-minute delay, the simple swaps, they aren't gimmicks. They're exits from a loop that was never designed with your goals in mind. 2 techniques matter most: the 5-4-3-2-1 reset to ground your senses, and the 2-minute pause to weaken cravings. Those alone create breathing room where choice returns. So here's your next move. Try one small swap today. Either start with a phone-free first hour or pause 2 minutes before you check. Then leave a comment with which one you chose. This breakup is quietly powerful. Small, consistent choices reclaim hours and calm.